Hello, everybody. Welcome. All right. So we're so glad that you could join us today. Go ahead and say hi in the chat. Let us know where you're tuning in from, and we'll get started in just a second. And if you have any questions as we go, feel free to drop them into the chat. And so today's session is all about selling with data, and leading us through it is Eddie, customer success lead here at Sponsor Pulse. And he's an expert on all things data and storytelling. So, Eddie, take it away.
Thanks so much, Kat, and thank you to all of you for joining us today. As Kat said, my name is Eddie Sedani. I'm the customer success lead here at Sponsor Pulse. And today, over the next 30 minutes, we're going to talk a little bit about how to leverage data in your sponsorship sales process. We'll go ahead. We'll dive right in because I know it's Friday afternoon for most of you. Kick back, relax. All of this is going to be sent to you. So you don't need to take all these notes and try to remember everything that was said. Don't worry, you'll get a copy of the webinar. Grab some popcorn if you want. Hopefully we make it entertaining. But if there's anything that we don't cover and that you have any more questions about, please feel free to reach out to myself or Kat or anyone else on our team. We're always here to help. Okay. So starting off, of course, like I said, webinar is going to be sent out to everyone. Please get the chat going. If you have any questions or comments or feedback, they're always welcome and encouraged. Just please try to keep it respectful. And there's going to be a bunch of data that you see today. All of it, if not most of it, is available on our website. There's also our Insights platform too that you can access through our website, www.sponsorpulse.com. Virtually everything's available there. But if you have any questions or need to talk about something a little bit deeper, like I said, reach out to myself or anyone else on the team. We're always here for assistance. So before we talk about sponsorship sales, the one thing that I do want to talk about that we're asked on a constant basis is whether or not sponsorship is going to continue to grow. And the overwhelming answer to that question is yes, right? Of course, it's going to continue to grow because people's passions and their emotions are in so many different things, and they continue to get larger and larger and larger and more prominent. And we're going to talk about a few examples in a moment. But the reason why this is important is because the experiences that you can get from sponsorship really can't be created, or at least brands really often can't recreate or replicate these passions and these emotions, but they want to be able to capitalize on these moments, right? They want to be associated with these moments that you can often only experience through sport or through music or lifestyle or cause or culture and charity. And the thing is even though that emotion is so amazing and it's such a powerful thing to experience, that in itself isn't enough to justify investment in sponsorship anymore, right? Today, more than ever, data is critical for demonstrating the true value of sponsorship and for unlocking those further conversations, right? You're talking about multi-year agreements. So you need to have data and insight to justify to a brand the investment that you're asking for them to make in your property, right? Brand managers expect data as part of the sale, and today we're going to walk you through what that looks like. All right. Now, I know a lot of us on the call today are in Canada, but we do have some people who are tuning in from the US and from all parts of the globe. So thank you for joining. Today, we're going to use kind of the Canadian landscape as context, but the concepts and the insights really are transferable to virtually any region in the globe. The first thing I want to talk about is some of the things that really captured my attention in the past year with regards to sponsorship, or really sponsorable moments, so to speak. And it starts naturally, of course, with the Toronto Blue Jays, right? What an amazing run the Toronto Blue Jays went on, going to Game 7 of the World Series. But if you think about it, really uniting a country behind a single baseball team. We had people from all across the nation flying in from all parts of Canada just to watch them play in the World Series. And for brands who have been involved for years, like TD Bank, for example, for them to ride that wave, benefit from the associations of that partnership, it's quite an amazing moment and something that you really can't recreate as a brand on your own. So, kudos to the Jays for getting as far as they did, and an amazing experience and moment for sponsorship in our nation. A little bit of a personal anecdote, the resurgence and comeback of Oasis. We had people not only fly to different parts of the globe to watch them play. Admittedly, I did do that. I went to Wembley. It was probably the most expensive trip of my life, but I'll never forget it. But in Toronto, right, when Oasis came to Toronto, we saw so many people who grew up as fans of the band, who hasn't been around for 20 years, come to this focal point of Toronto to watch them play at Rogers Stadium and just to experience something that means so much to them and that possibly defines, a part of their life, generation ago. Adidas capitalized on this immensely by creating a limited edition merchandise. Very hard to get your hands on any Oasis merch. And they did an amazing job, right? And again, it's to demonstrate how people feel so passionate about something that they'll relocate. Like they will move from one part of the country all the way to Toronto just to watch a concert. Again, something that's very hard to recreate as a brand. NHL Four Nations face off. I mean, the NHL couldn't have asked for a better time for a Canada-US trade war. There's all kinds of news around, Canada being the 51st state, or the political relationship and environment between Canada and the US was a little bit turbulent. There's tariffs, there's reciprocal tariffs, there's all kinds of stuff, and it culminates in an ice hockey showdown between Team Canada and Team USA. And of course, Rogers and many other brands did a great job of capitalizing on that moment and promoting how Canadian they are and how proud they are to be Canadian. Again, something that you can't really replicate throughout or in any other area of marketing. So kudos to not only Team Canada for winning, of course, but to the brands that were involved and really capitalized on that moment. This year is the inaugural year of the Northern Super League, Canada's first ever professional women's soccer league. The finals next weekend, and some amazing partners: Canadian Tire, BMO, DoorDash, who jumped on board to support not only women's sport but soccer at the national level. There's so much more beyond this partnership than just getting involved because it's the right thing to do. No, there are business outcomes. There is an untapped opportunity and potential here that businesses and brands have realized, and it's about time not only that we have a professional women's sport league, but that brands are actually starting to invest in women's sports. And it's a great segue to the PWHL. An amazing year. 50% increase in attendance, and the activations that some brands are running with this property are just unmatched. One of the best that we've ever tested is the Molson See Her Name contest. Thousands of activations we test here at Sponsor Pulse. That was one of the best that we've recorded. So some really cool things happening in that space in women's sport, specifically NSL and the PWHL in Canada. And lastly, the Calgary Stampede, and a shout out to the CNE in Toronto. 1.4 million visitors this year, just shy of record-setting numbers. But again, you've got people who are coming from all across the nation just to experience this event or this moment. And that's the sort of thing that brands want to capitalize on. How do we become associated with that? Right? How do we become connected to those moments, those feel-good moments? And these are just some of the examples, right, of the passions that exist that I noticed where brands could really win today. So what are the benefits of sponsorship, right? Before we talk about sponsorship sales, you need to know specifically why sponsorship works, or honestly, sometimes where it doesn't work. And we know that when it comes to driving awareness of a brand, if we look at the entire marketing communications budget, and we know that only a portion of that is going to go to sponsorship, I know we all hope that that portion would be larger, but how do we justify, right? Like if I'm the marketing manager, how do I justify what to spend on traditional media versus an activated sponsorship, so to speak? Well, it comes down to the brand's objectives, right? And you need to reflect on that. If you're selling sponsorship, you need to think about what are the brand's priorities? What are they looking to achieve with this budget? And if it is just truly to drive awareness of the brand and that's it, you need to be honest about that, right? Sponsorship sometimes isn't the best way to do that. And there's data on the screen that can justify that. But if it is to drive something that's called benefit comprehension, so understanding, the products and services of a brand and how they can enhance your experience or, provide services for your life, or increase behavioral impact, so motivators for purchase and attitude, there's nothing that does it better than sponsorship, right? So step one, Understand what are the marketing objectives of the prospect. And if it is to drive purchase consideration, brand love, brand affinity, then you know that sponsorship is the vehicle to help achieve those. And now you have data, or at least find some data to help you justify that conversation and move forward with a potential pitch. When we talk about impact, we kind of break it out into two kind of buckets, right? There's the attitudinal impact and the behavioral impact. And the attitudinal impact is, brand love, brand affinity, how people perceive the brand as a result of the sponsorship. And with regards to the Canadian context, we know that 51%, or approximately 1 in 2 of Canadian consumers, agree that brand logos and associations with a team have become part of that property's personality or image. Think of Scotiabank Arena and MLSE properties, or the CIBC Run for the Cure, right? 48% of Canadian consumers notice when a new brand or company starts partnering with a property they care about. And 46% agree that they'd rather see advertising featuring properties or events they care about than regular advertising. And we have some really interesting data. We're not going to show it today, but that can justify for sport properties specifically, like a commercial, how if it's just a commercial about the brand, if it associates itself with the team, or if it involves a player of the team, how potential conversion and impact of that ad goes up and up and up, the more you associate the property with the brand. Okay. Behavioral impact, beyond the attitudes, right? Can we shift driving behaviors and to participate and purchase and become advocates for sponsors? Yes, the answer is overwhelmingly yes, right? 46% of Canadian consumers agree that they're more likely to participate in a promotion or contest if the prizes are associated with the property they like. 45% agree that they're likely to follow or sponsoring a property they follow impacts their feelings and decisions. And 43% agree that it's not a coincidence some of the brands they're most loyal to also sponsor something they care about. Okay, so there's a lot of benefits to sponsorship, but what are some of the challenges in sponsorship? And many of you who are on this call right now will have experienced plenty of these in your career and in your day-to-day. And it's important to understand them, right? Number one, contending news and views. There's a lot of different opinions out there, and a lot of them use different sources of data, so to speak. And sometimes there's an overload of data, or it's inconsistent. I mean, take it from us. We're a data company, and we have one approach and one methodology, but it's not the only approach and only methodology, right? There's plenty of others out there. And so sometimes you come across incomplete storylines where things might not necessarily make sense. And you might also find yourself dealing with someone who has a fear of missing out, right? Not too long ago, of course, we've already spoken about it, but just there was a rampant surge of brands who wanted to scream from the mountaintops that they were Canadian and they promote Canadian, and everybody wanted to capitalize on that moment where it was, the Canadian context of I'm Canadian, I'm proud to be Canadian, I want to purchase and bring brands into my life that also promote Canadiana. So we saw virtually every brand in Canada screaming from the top of the rooftops that they were Canadian, and these are how they support Canadian and the Canadian lifestyle. But you also sometimes experience brands who have a fear of being involved. Not too long ago, cryptocurrency seemed like the biggest thing in the market, and everybody wanted to dial into crypto and bring on a crypto partner. And then things cooled off. And then there was a lot of properties who maybe didn't want to be involved with a crypto partner. Some properties who maybe are in the news for wrong reasons. A lot of brands want to disassociate themselves from those properties. So these are just some of the challenges that you see. Internal politics. Sometimes a senior decision maker has a tie to a property or to an area, and naturally they find themselves investing in sponsorship that doesn't necessarily make sense for the brand. Proving value for investment. This is a major challenge. One of the biggest challenges that we know to exist for brand managers is how do they prove value internally, and growing uncertainty. I mean, just look at the economy right now. Are we in a recession? We're entering a recession. Nobody knows what's going on, right? Nobody knows what tomorrow's going to hold in store for us, whether it's an issue with a recession or a pandemic or whatever it might be. There is growing levels of uncertainty in our market. And again, these are just some of the challenges that we're faced on a day-to-day basis. We spoke to thousands of sponsored professionals and asked them the same question: what keeps you up at night? 66% or 2/3 came back and said measurement. Demonstrating the measurement of attribution is a huge challenge for brand managers. Trust. There's a serious lack of trust in our industry between buyers and sellers. Almost 3 in 5 listed that as a reason. But the most overwhelming reason that was listed was demonstrating the value of sponsorship internally versus other marketing spends. Okay. And that's something you need to think about, right? And so how do you overcome these challenges, specifically that last one? And the answer is data. right? Data is how you overcome it. You provide insights, provide storylines. What's the data that can justify these investments? There's been a shift from relationship driven decision making to data driven decision making. Budgets are getting tighter. The onus is on the properties now to prove value and to prove ROI and measurement. And today we're going to walk through just one of the ways you can do that. So when we talk about data, it kind of filters into three buckets, specifically when we're talking about sponsorship sales. Okay. And at the top of that kind of Venn diagram there, you see what's called audience data. So who is your fan? These are things like demographics, psychographics, the purchasing behaviors, the brand usage behaviors, all those things that articulate who your fan is. And hopefully you can identify where there's an overlap with the brand prospect. The bottom left, you see engagement data. How does that audience engage with your property? Event attendance, we're talking about digital following, maybe some social following, all kinds of different ways that that audience is engaging with your property. Can you demonstrate how that audience is actually going to, or how you're going to bring that audience to the prospect? Some insights that can really help articulate that. And then on the bottom right, we have performance data. What are some results you can share? ROI metrics. Do you have any testimonies, any case studies? And sometimes if you can dial all three of those together, you have a beautiful pitch in what we call the sponsored value zone. You're able to articulate the perceived value that a brand would hypothetically, as long as the partnership is activated properly, the value that they can receive from a partnership with your property. So today, we're going to talk about audience data specifically. Okay, we're going to talk about how you can leverage audience data in the sponsorship sales process. And if there is any interest in engagement data and in performance data, we're always happy to have a second and third webinar. But given that we only have less than 15 minutes left together, we want to talk about audience data and really talk to you about how you can tell your story from that audience data perspective. Okay, our use case today is going to be the Heart and Stroke Foundation. A lot of webinars, specifically in sport, or specifically in sponsorship, focus on sport or music or entertainment. And before this webinar, we got a request, hey, can you make this talking subject, can you make this webinar a little bit relevant for not-for-profit? And absolutely, right? So we're going to kind of demonstrate how a not-for-profit property can leverage data, specifically audience data, to go to a brand and articulate the strengths of a potential partnership with their property, right? How do they win? And where it all starts is with the overall property reach and health. Okay. At Sponsor Pulse, when we talk about overall reach, we're talking about engagement. That's our metric for engagement. Others use other metrics. Awareness is a common one, event attendance, but we specifically talk about engagement. So that's the percentage of those in the population who have taken some form of behavior with the property in the past 12 months. Okay. You can see there's 7 or 8 different behaviors on the screen there: watched live on television, followed socially, volunteered their time, or donated. But essentially what we're trying to do is cast as wide of a net as we possibly can to understand the sheer number of people that this property can realistically deliver to a brand. Okay. And when we're talking about that metric, engagement, with regards to the Heart and Stroke Foundation, we know that on average, around 37%, so just over 1 in 3 Canadians, engage with the Heart and Stroke Foundation in some form or another. Okay, so they can do one or many of those behaviors that were on the past screen. And when we extrapolate that to population age 13 to 64, that's where all of our data is collected, we know that that's just over 9 million Canadians. Okay, 9.22 million Canadians who are engaging with the Heart and Stroke Foundation on an annual basis. And that's where your story starts, right? How far of a reach can you provide? And that's an incredible number, right? If you're able to provide some sort of trending data, this is a huge benefit when telling sponsorship storylines. You want to articulate or demonstrate how your property has grown over time, if at all. And what we see here on the screen is the Heart and Stroke Foundation has remained consistent year over year since we first started tracking it in 2018, with around 37-38% of Canadians engaging with the property annually. You can see they weathered the COVID storm there in 2021, a little bit of a dip. But overall, right, over 1 in 3 engaging with the property is a really good story, not only for prospective partners, but for existing ones as well, right? You want to be able to tell that story. Hopefully, if there's any questions or upcoming renewals, it's just as important to tell the story of your performance and your progress, not only for those who are not part of your ecosystem just yet, but for those who have been part of your portfolio for years and years on end. Next, we want to see, if possible, how deep we can get into our audience, right? At Sponsor Pulse, we don't only stop at engagement, we try to understand the emotional connection and potential impact of the overall audience as well. So what are the baselines that you know to be true, right? Before we talk about any specific segments or relevant categories to the brand, just understand your overall audience first. And so of the 9.2 million Canadians who engage with the Heart and Stroke Foundation, 1.7 million are coming back on a weekly basis. 1.6 million say they're going to have an increased interest in the property over the next year, which is a great indication for growth. 1.2 million identify as passionate supporters of the Heart and Stroke Foundation. Right? You want to meet your target audience in places that are most salient in their lives. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, 25% or 2.3 million Canadians who engage with the Heart and Stroke Foundation are also likely to be more favorable towards a sponsor of the property. Okay. So gather what you can about your audience, right? Understand what you can provide from that 30,000-foot view. And then from there, try to transparently build out the competitive landscape, right? And this is really important. It's something that properties could maybe do a little bit of a better job, is being transparent. You're not always going to be number one, and that's okay. That's not your job. Your job is to articulate and demonstrate the areas where you win. How can you complement the portfolio? What do you bring to the table that the others might not? And so when we look at, in this case, the Heart and Stroke Foundation versus other causal or charity properties in Canada, we see that it's among the leaders in the cause and charity space, right? But it's not necessarily at the very top. That belongs to the Canadian Cancer Society, but that's okay, right? We're still above and on par with many of the other leading cause and charity properties in the space, right? And again, try to think outside the box. Okay, it's good for us to compare ourselves to like type properties, but sport dominates the overall sponsorship landscape, right? We know that around 70% of sponsorship dollars are invested in the sport area. So can we compare ourselves to other sport properties? Absolutely. And you should, because it gives some comparative context, right? It helps the brand manager understand generally how you stand versus some of the leading sport entertainments in the nation. In Canada, of course, that property is the National Hockey League with 59%. In the US, that would be the National Football League. But it's the same storyline, right? Don't only compare yourself to your specific passion point. Try to extend to other adjacent passion points as well. We see here the Heart and Stroke Foundation actually isn't too far off of some of the leading sport properties in the nation, right? You have the NFL, NBA, MLB, and CFL that are slightly above it, but we're also ahead of some other leading ones too. CHL, Formula One, and MLS. What an incredible story to tell for the Heart and Stroke Foundation with regards to engagement. But one of the things that we already spoke about is that engagement isn't the entire story, especially for a causal property. How do you win? Well, the one thing that we know is while sport and entertainment will always deliver the deepest levels of reach, cause will always deliver the best potential for conversion. And so if we show kind of a list of the Heart and Stroke Foundation brand favorability, or the percentage of those who are likely to feel more favorable towards sponsors of the Heart and Stroke Foundation versus the percentage of those who are likely to feel more favorable of all the leading sport properties in the nation, well, it tells a much different story, doesn't it? Now we find ourselves undoubtedly at the top of that list. And so the challenge or the onus is on the property sometimes to get a little creative and think outside the box, right? Perhaps the brand is already invested in sport and they're looking for something outside of that portfolio. Amazing. How can you complement their already existing portfolio, right? Show yourself versus others in the landscape and be transparent about it. Again, it's okay not to always be number one, but where there are areas that you do win, don't shy away from putting those on screen because those are the storylines that are going to get you to the next level. So now that we've done that, we've understood our property from that 30,000-foot view, and we've kind of built out the competitive landscape. Next, we want to take a deep dive into our audience, and we really want to see the degree to which we can deliver the prospect's target. And it's really important, number one, to focus on, again, your profile. What do you know of your fan base? At Sponsor Pulse, we have the capabilities to do something like this. Hopefully you do as well. If not, reach out to us. We can help you figure it out. But where is there over indexes for those who are engaged with your property versus the general population? For example, on screen here, all the numbers in gray are the general population, those little numbers in gray. The larger numbers are the percentage of the Heart and Stroke Foundation engaged profile that fit into each segment. And then the ones that are highlighted in purple specifically are those where there's a considerable over-index versus the general population. And so when we talk about those who engage with the Heart and Stroke Foundation, we know they're more likely to be male, 18 to 34 years old, have families in the household, live in Ontario, and own small businesses. What a desirable market for a lot of brands that are out there. And so you need to think about that and reflect on the business segment of the brand. And can you realistically deliver that audience? If you're able to, can you look at a little bit, can you do target efficiency and understand the categories that are most relevant to the brand? How can you deliver that category? This is an effective exercise, not only for sales, of course, you want to be able to deliver the purchasing category or the segment of the brand, but for prospecting, right? If you're able to generate a list of the categories that most over-index with your property versus the general population, look at your existing portfolio of sponsors. Many, if not all of them, will have category exclusivity. So come back to this list, remove the categories that you virtually can't touch, and voila, you'll be left with the categories where a brand stands to benefit most from a partnership with you. And the one category that's on this list, we have short-term on the left here and long-term on the right. We see towards the bottom, switch banking to another institution. We see that 13% of those who engage with the Heart Stroke Foundation are likely to switch their banking to another institution in the next 18 months, which is 4% higher than the general population. So we're going to dive into that category for our use case. And we're going to think about, okay, we're the Heart Stroke Foundation, and we are talking to one of our long partners in Desjardins, right? Heart Stroke Foundation has an incredible partnership with Desjardins, and they want to think about their business outcomes because that's the important storyline at the end of the day. What is the brand manager going to take internally and sell to the decision makers so that there is justification for the investment? At the end of the day, it is a business decision, right? So what we know to be true is 13% of those who engage with the Heart and Stroke Foundation are likely to switch their banking institution over the next 18 months. And when we extrapolate that to a population, that's 1.2 million consumers who are engaged with the Heart and Stroke Foundation that fall in that category. Amazing. And so Desjardins wants to know not only the percentage of the Heart and Stroke Foundation engaged who are customers of their bank, specifically Desjardins, but also customers of the other banks too. National Bank, CIBC, Scotiabank, BMO, TD, RBC, right? Because at the end of the day, it's about marketing objectives and the business outcomes, which are, for someone like Desjardins, not only to retain their existing customer base, but also to acquire the potential market, right? Acquire competitive market share. And so what we're looking at on screen right here is the percentage of those engaged who are likely to feel more favorable to a brand that sponsors the Heart and Stroke Foundation simply because of its association, right? We see here that left number, total no filters, that's the general population at 25. We already know that to be true. For all the other brand users on there, we see RBC, TD Bank, CIBC, so on and so forth, that over-index in potential favorability. And if Desjardins is that brand, then they're the ones who are going to receive that consideration and receive that brand love and brand affinity simply because of its association with the property. Okay, so we're talking business outcomes at the end of the day. So I know we have a few minutes left here. We're going to finally bring it all together. What we just spoke about today is audience data, right? Understanding who is your fan. What are the data points or insights you can provide to a brand manager with regards to demographics, purchasing behaviors, brand preferences that really demonstrate and articulate that you can deliver their target audience. Following from that, you want to focus on the engagement data. How do they engage with you? Is there any event attendance or social following? Any digital engagement metrics you can share or any revenue generated, for example, donations, if you're a cause or charity, that can show how the audience is engaging with your property. And then lastly, do you have any performance data that you can share with the prospect? Any measurement results? Do you have any case studies that you were really proud of? Any testimonies from existing partners? Or if you can you show a value to investment ratio to show the value that existing partners are currently getting versus their investments? Okay. Hopefully that gets you into the sponsored value zone. So a few last key takeaways to finish things off. Number one, start by understanding the brand's marketing objectives. Sometimes sponsorship isn't the best marketing tactic, but you need to understand what their priorities are. Identify their pain points and bring them solutions. Two, understand their target audience. Who is it? What information can you gather to best understand who they're trying to intercept? It's a great segue to number three is understanding your audience as well and identifying if there's an overlap. Again, at the end of the day, to what degree can you deliver their target so they can realistically intercept their business that are going to have bottom line effects on perhaps it's revenue, purchase conversion, awareness, whatever their KPIs are. And lastly, we didn't talk too much about this, but how do you intend to bring the partnership to life? Brands don't want logos, they want outcomes. They want to know how their dollars are being invested. And the onus is on you to be transparent about that. Is it in content? Is it in media? Is it in hospitality? Demonstrate or be articulate and transparent with how their dollars are going to be invested, and you'll be able to hopefully get the second, third, and fourth conversations. Lastly, a bit of a shameless plug. Virtually all of the data that we went through on here is available on our Insights platform. Just go ahead and scan this QR code. You'll see there's a free option available. But if you want to get a little bit of a deeper dive, see some paid features, discuss ongoing dedicated support, or learn more about any of our solutions, really, whether it's valuation, measurement, strategy, sales representation, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Myself, Kat, the rest of the team, we're always here to help you out and answer any of your questions that you might have. So with that, I know we're at the 1:30 mark. I'm going to pass things over to Kat if there's a couple of questions. And apologize if anyone needs to go. But thank you for your time. And yeah, we'll answer any questions now if there are any.
Awesome. Thank you, Eddie. That was great. There was one question in the chat about how are you measuring behavioral impact that you mentioned on slide 6, if you want to quickly go over that.
Yeah, so with regards to behavioral impact, there's a couple of different ways we do it. On the Insights platform, we come right out and ask, are you likely to consider purchasing from a brand that sponsors this property? Getting as close as we can to attribution to understand, really if people or if the property and the sponsorship is moving the needle where it matters most for brands, which is in purchase decision making, right? We have a solution called our Impact Report. That is our approach to measurement. We dive deep into partnerships. We ask about activations and programs and campaigns. We ask about equity statements and really test to see whether or not the sponsorship is helping the brand actually achieve what's most important to them. So at the end of the day, everything we do is consumer driven, all survey based, but we talk to people, we ask them the questions that matter most to brands, and hopefully those insights can help them make the best informed decisions moving forward.
Awesome. Thank you. We had quite a few questions come in at registration, so we're just gonna rip through a couple of them. The first one was, how do you value a sponsorship package?
Yes. And by the way, these questions are real questions. This isn't just questions that Kat and I generated and said, oh, we got questions in advance. These actually did come through. So to the people who sent these through, thank you so much. It means the world to us. Your engagement before and during the webinar, it makes this all the worthwhile. To answer the question, how do we value a sponsorship package? We have an approach and a methodology that, of course, is just one of many different ways. But the way we approach it, first and foremost, we look at the size of the property, right? What is the potential reach and the potential that this property fan base, so to speak, is going to grow? Once we can size the overall opportunity, then we look at, what should a brand realistically expect to spend on a sponsorship of insert property name here? For a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 sponsorship, understanding that fair market value, like I said, what a brand should expect to spend on sponsorship is step 2. And then step 3, we look at each individual asset that's been offered in the package. And what we're able to do after that is we can value each individual asset and then marry it all together to say, okay, a brand should realistically be expecting to spend X amount of dollars on a tier 1 partnership of a property this size, but the package that's been offered sometimes isn't up to standard, right? We need to maybe increase some of the offering, maybe have a discussion about, how are the dollars being invested? There needs to be more attributed to the package, etc. But we kind of do a 3-phase approach. 1, size the property. 2, fair market, kind of what's the value of a sponsorship of the property in general. And then 3, what are each individual assets worth? All from the consumer context, understanding potential exposure, quality of exposure, likelihood to see it. All of those nuances come into play. But if there's any questions specifically about our valuation and how we do it, I'm more than happy to have that conversation. There's also some webinar, I think Adam Mitchell, our CEO, and Neil Covent, they've spoken about this in some other webinars. So if you have questions, we're happy to send you to some more additional content on that too.
Great. Yeah, I'll post that in the chat for whoever's sticking around. So the next quick question we will go over is how do we prove impact to stakeholders?
Yeah, impact. So impact is a huge word that we use here at Sponsor Pulse and at IMI. At the end of the day, business outcomes are essential. So when we talk about impact, I kind of mentioned it in the webinar. We have kind of two ways of looking at it. There's the attitudinal impact and the behavioral impact. So attitudinal is more like that brand love, brand affinity. I feel better towards the brand. Um, Behavioral is more like purchase consideration, spending dollars and cents tomorrow, purchase intent. How do we measure it? In our impact reports, that's one of our key solutions here at Sponsor Pulse. I kind of already mentioned it, but we go in the field right after the culmination of a sponsorship, the bulk of a spend, and we talk to consumers, we talk to the fan base, and we ask them about aided and unaided recall. We ask about sources of awareness. We ask if the partnership has enhanced their purchase consideration of the brand, or has enhanced their brand favorability of the brand, or the likelihood to to consider purchasing from that sponsor. And we don't only measure it against the portfolio, but what we also do is we also compare it to the industry at large. So you have competitive context. It's one thing to do well, amongst the other sponsors of the property, but when we look at it at the larger scale of things, is this top 10%? Is this good, bad? Do you need to reconsider investment? Do you need to allocate other dollars to certain areas? Are you driving awareness over and over and over again with all the same activations, or can you maybe take some of those dollars that are all doing the same thing and reinvest them into an area that really drives consideration and increase awareness of that activation, so that you're doing multiple things? But all of that is part of our impact report. At the end of the day, we go in the field, we talk to the fan base, and again, we ask them the questions that matter most to the brands. We also test against equity statements too, which essentially, what does the brand want to be known for as a result of the partnership, so that we can report back on whether or not the brand is actually hitting those targets.
Awesome. And the last question we'll cover is, what do you do if you're a new property?
That's a great question. I saw that question come in, and I think that's fantastic. And the one example that came to mind right away was the Toronto Tempo. Sometimes you don't have, or there's no data that exists on your fan base, so to speak, because you don't exist yet. You haven't even played a game of basketball. So you need to get a little bit creative. The one thing that I would always suggest is, what is out there that you can use as a proxy? So, for example, if you're the Toronto Tempo and there aren't any, or there really isn't a Toronto Tempo fan base, so to speak, or it's just starting out, can you look at WNBA fans, right, in Ontario? There's a very high likelihood that the WNBA fan is going to engage with the Toronto Tempo. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be the most highly identified Toronto Tempo fan, but that could be a really effective proxy. So try to get a little bit creative. It's not always one-to-one. Things aren't always black and white. Sometimes you need to get creative when storytelling, especially when you're trying to sell sponsorship in advance, right? Because people want to know, well, what's the size of your fan base? Well, we haven't even played a game yet. But if you can get creative, just always be transparent with the brand. Transparency is essential. Like I said, 3/5 of the industry already has a lack of trust. So if you can come right out of the gates being as transparent with the prospect as possible, it will work in your favor 10 out of 10 times. No question about that. But yeah, at the end of the day, just get creative, find proxies that are out there that you can use to get as close to your property potential fan base as you can, and then make sure you have a process in place to report on something that might be a little more tangible, kind of throughout the partnership agreement, so that they know, okay, you're doing the best you can, and you're going to continue to do the necessary steps to really report back on those metrics.
Amazing. Well, thank you. Thank you for that answer. We're a little bit over time, so thank you to everybody who stuck around. This was a really great presentation, Eddie, and I think the feedback in the chat shows. So we will be sending the recording and the slide deck, so keep an eye out on your inbox, and we hope to see you again, and have a great rest of your Friday, and enjoy your weekend. So
thanks everyone, and thanks to you, Kat. You're the best. Everyone, have a good weekend.
Bye.